You move into a new neighborhood expecting peace, safety, and a fresh start. You imagine barbecues, friendly waves, kids laughing in cul-de-sacs. But sometimes, the place you thought was a haven turns into a battleground over petty rules, power-hungry neighbors, and assumptions. This is the story of how Laura from the HOA tried to have my daughter taken away, not realizing I was the county sheriff. My name is James Cole. 43 years old. Former Marine. Now county sheriff of Marion Grove. And proud single father of a fiery 9-year-old girl named Kayla. We had just moved into Maple Ridge, one of those upper-middle-class suburbs with manicured lawns, a tightly run HOA, and neighbors who cared more about your hedges than your heart. We weren't flashy people. I drove a pickup, kept to myself, and had one goal: give my daughter a fresh start after her mom passed. Kayla, still grieving but growing stronger, found comfort in drawing chalk art on the driveway. Every day after school, she'd pour her heart into those colorful swirls, sometimes spelling out poems or messages like, "Hi, Mom in Heaven." Most people found it sweet. One person did not. Laura, the HOA president. A name that echoed through the neighborhood with a strange mixture of fear and eye rolls. Laura was in her early 50s, wore pressed khakis like armor, and wielded the HOA handbook like a sword. Her yard was pristine, plastic tulips stood in perfect rows, and a sign near her front porch read, "This is an HOA monitored zone. Please conform." We kept our distance, until she came knocking. I opened the door, Kayla peeking from behind me. "Laura." "Mr. Cole, welcome." "I'm Laura. HOA president. You should have received the guidelines packet in your welcome folder." "Me." "We did. Thanks." "Laura. I just wanted to remind you that chalk art on driveways isn't permitted. It stains the concrete and attracts pests." "Me. Pests?" "Laura. Rodents, birds. The crumbs, the chaos. It can lead to bigger problems. We expect conformity here." I stayed polite. Explained it was temporary. That Kayla was adjusting. And it was her way of healing. Laura gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Laura. Well, feelings are one thing, but rules are another. Kindly ensure your daughter stops defacing the property." And with that, she turned and marched away. I stood frozen, Kayla behind me clutching her chalk pieces. I knelt down beside her. "Me. Don't worry, baby. You're not doing anything wrong." But things didn't end there. That was the first warning. The second came as a letter, folded precisely, stuffed into our mailbox without a stamp. It stated we were in violation of HOA Code 14.2, temporary art not approved by the HOA. The third violation? A photo of Kayla coloring with chalk, with the word evidence scrawled across the top. We were being watched. Kayla started getting scared. She didn't want to go outside anymore. She'd draw quietly in her room, asking me if the angry lady would get mad. My patience was thinning. So, I attended the next HOA meeting. Plastic chairs. Coffee in styrofoam cups. A slideshow titled Q3 HOA Updates and Community Conduct Enforcement. I arrived quietly, sitting in the back. Laura didn't notice me at first. She was mid-sentence, talking about preserving community standards, when she mentioned an influx of new residents not fully aware of neighborhood values. Then she locked eyes with me. Laura. Oh. Sheriff Cole. Glad to see you're getting involved. Me. I figured it's time I heard firsthand what these standards are. She smiled, but her voice was sharp. Laura. I'm sure you understand, structure keeps neighborhoods safe. We can't allow chaos, even in the form of children's drawings. Me. Safe neighborhoods come from kindness, not controlling behavior. And my daughter's art is harmless. The room fell silent. But Laura didn't back down. She passed a motion for a vote, ban all sidewalk and driveway art, including chalk. It passed, 6-3. Most people didn't want trouble. But the real trouble came later. Yes, police. At my door. 2 young officers, Officer Grady and Officer Lynn. Grady, awkwardly. Sir, we received a call about possible neglect, a child left unattended, engaging in unsafe behavior with chemicals. Me. Chemicals? Lynn. We were told the child was exposed to toxic art materials. Unsupervised. They looked unsure. I knew the drill. Someone was abusing the system. I called Kayla outside. She stepped out in her overalls, holding Crayola chalk. Safe. Non-toxic. Approved for toddlers. I turned to the officers and calmly asked, "May I ask who made the report?" They exchanged glances. Grady, reluctantly. Anonymous, but the complainant insisted the HOA had photographic evidence. That's when it clicked. Laura had escalated this. I handed them my ID. Me. Sheriff James Cole. County Division. Their eyes widened. Grady, embarrassed. Oh. Sheriff. We had no idea. I nodded. Me. I know you're doing your job. But this? This is harassment. They apologized. I didn't blame them. But I wasn't going to let it go. Imagine calling the police to try and intimidate a child, and not realizing her father is the sheriff who oversees the entire department. Laura thought she was just pushing out a nuisance. She had no idea she had just picked a fight with someone who understood the law inside and out. And more importantly, someone who didn't take lightly to people threatening his daughter. That night, I filed a formal complaint against Laura and the HOA. Board, abuse of authority, harassment, and misuse of emergency services. I sent copies to the HOA management company, the neighborhood attorney, and posted a version to the community Facebook group. Things exploded. Post title, HOA abuse of power, my daughter was the target. Accompanied by a photo of Kayla's chalk drawing, I miss you, Mommy, with a police car in the background. The comments poured in. Neighbor 1. I knew Laura was power drunk, but this is disgusting. Neighbor 2. Is she really targeting a grieving child? This is evil. Neighbor 3. Sheriff Cole, you have our full support. Don't let her bully your family. Laura tried to delete comments. Then disable the post. Then block people. But it was too late. Other parents began sharing their stories, how their kids were scolded for riding scooters too loudly, how she banned sidewalk lemonade stands, even how she once measured the height of someone's lawn and issued a fine for being half an inch over. I had stirred the pot, but what came next would prove that Laura hadn't learned her lesson. Because she wasn't done. She wanted control. And she was about to take it too far. After my post went viral on the neighborhood group, the tide started to shift. People were talking. Whispers in the park. Side glances at the HOA mailbox. Neighbors who used to avoid me were now walking over, offering support. But with every message of solidarity, Laura's grip tightened. She hated losing control. 3 days after the police incident, I received a notice, certified, stamped with urgency, from the HOA board. It accused me of violating a new amendment, property usage codes concerning minor activities, on HOA-monitored grounds. In simpler terms, Kayla's chalk art was now classified as a nuisance behavior under Clause 11B. A fine of $150 per incident was attached, retroactively applied to 7 different days she had drawn on the driveway. $1,050 for chalk drawings. I stared at the paper in disbelief. This wasn't about art. It wasn't about HOA guidelines. It was personal. Laura wanted a war. So, I prepared for one. Tanya, my sharp-witted deputy, raised an eyebrow after I explained the situation. Tanya. She really picked the wrong house, huh? Me. I gave her 3 chances. She used the police to scare my kid. Now she's trying to fine us into submission. Tanya. You want to go public? Me. Not yet. I want to handle this by the book. Let's hit her with her own rules. I spent the next 2 nights reading the HOA's charter, bylaws, and dispute resolution clauses. I noticed something interesting. Laura had made the amendments without quorum approval. It was supposed to be voted on by residents before enforcement. She bypassed the rules to create a new one, just to target us. This wasn't just unethical. It was illegal under the HOA's own constitution. I requested an emergency board meeting under Clause 4.7.1 of the HOA charter. Yes, I memorized it by then. The HOA management company had no choice but to allow it. That night, a crowd of 36 residents filled the community clubhouse. Some brought lawn chairs. Others came straight from work. Kayla sat beside me, holding her favorite pink chalk, visibly nervous. Laura stood at the front, stiff, holding a folder. Thank you for coming. I called this meeting to address an abuse of authority and a direct violation of our HOA's voting procedures. Laura, cutting in. This is not the place for personal grievances. Me. I disagree. You passed an amendment targeting children's chalk art, enforced it without community approval, and issued retroactive fines against my daughter. That's not leadership. That's a vendetta. The room buzzed with murmurs. I handed out printed copies of the HOA charter, highlighting the clause that required at least 51% member approval for any amendment. Me, to crowd. Did any of you vote on this change? Raise your hand if you were informed. Not a single hand went up. Neighbor, Mr. Peterson. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Mrs. Alvarez. She fined my grandson too. Said his bubble machine left residue. I paid it just to avoid trouble. One by one, the stories poured out, Laura's threats, fines, complaints over birthday parties and Halloween decorations. She'd rolled through fear. But now, she was exposed. Me, to board. I motioned to suspend Laura's authority pending an independent audit of HOA enforcement practices. Laura, panicking. You don't have that power. Me. Actually, I do. Clause 8.3.2, emergency suspension upon presentation of procedural misconduct and community support. I turned to the room. Me. All in favor? Hand shot up, fast, unanimous. Even 2 board members who once supported her voted yes. Laura's face drained of color. She stepped down, slamming her folder shut, muttering something about ungrateful newcomers and losing civility. Kayla whispered, "Did we win?" I squeezed her hand. "Me? We're just getting started. You'd think that would be the end of it. That Laura would retreat quietly into her plastic flower fortress. But people like her, they don't surrender. They plot." And what she did next would take this from petty drama to dangerous territory. 3 days after the meeting, I arrived home to find a woman waiting on the porch. Clipboard. ID badge. Calm voice. CPS worker. "Hello. Mr. Cole? I'm here for a wellness check on your daughter, Kayla." My blood went cold. Me? What prompted this visit? CPS worker, reading form. Anonymous report of neglect, improper supervision, and exposure to unsafe materials. I stared at her. Me, firm. She's being targeted. Again. CPS worker, sympathetic. I understand. But we still need to conduct the check. May I speak to Kayla? I called her outside. She smiled, calm and bubbly, asked the woman if she wanted to see her newest chalk castle. The worker looked around, saw our home, clean, safe, stocked with toys, books, and plenty of food. She ended the check in less than 10 minutes. CPS worker, before leaving. Off the record, this is ridiculous. You're clearly a great parent. Sorry. You're going through this. This wasn't coincidence. Laura had escalated things again. Only now, she wasn't just abusing HOA power. She was filing false reports to get the government to do her dirty work. That crossed a line. And I wasn't going to let it go unanswered. That night, I gathered evidence. All of it. The timeline of incidents. The anonymous tips. The sudden creation of art bans. And a surprise, one of the officers who responded the first time? Grady? He came by off-duty. Officer Grady. Sheriff. I probably shouldn't say this. But Laura? She came into the station a week before that call. Said she had concerns about a new family. Asked if there was a way to get a wellness check triggered. Anonymously. Me. She planned it? Grady. She was digging. Looking for a way to make you look bad. That was the final piece. I handed everything to my department's legal team. They drafted a formal harassment complaint to the HOA management company and sent a cease and desist letter to Laura personally. She was warned. Any further action would lead to criminal charges, harassment, false reporting, and defamation. And then I made one more move. Photo of Kayla's new chalk drawing, a giant smiling sun, stick figures holding hands. Underneath it, I wrote, "To those who tried to dim my daughter's light, she's still smiling. She's still drawing. And now, so are all the kids on the block." Dozens of families joined in. Sidewalks lit up with rainbows, stars, butterflies, even one that read "Laura can't stop the chalk." It became a movement. People who once felt scared began taking back their space. Even the local news picked it up. Headline: Sheriff vs. HOA, a neighborhood uprising sparked by sidewalk art. Laura tried to save face, but it was too late. The HOA voted her out permanently in the next election cycle. She sold her house 2 months later. And as for Kayla? She was voted Neighborhood Artist of the Year in our local block party. Her artwork is now framed in the community center. We still live in Maple Ridge. The chalk buckets are still full. And the driveway? Well, it's a canvas of joy, not a battlefield. Because no one, not even an HOA tyrant, should ever mistake their title for true authority. And no one should ever come between a father and his daughter. Peace isn't the absence of trouble, it's knowing that when trouble knocks, you'll answer the door and look it in the eye. Laura didn't just leave Maple Ridge quietly, she tried to rewrite the narrative on her way out. I'll give her this, she was relentless. A strategist. In stilettos. Even after everything she pulled, the cops, CPS, the fake amendment, she still had one card left to play, her reputation. And reputation is currency in a neighborhood like this. 2 weeks after Laura put her house on the market, a new blog post started circulating titled HOA Chaos, Sheriff's Overreach and the Real Story Behind the Sidewalk Art Scandal. It was anonymously written, but anyone with half a brain could tell it had Laura's tone all over it. In the post, she painted herself as the victim. As HOA president, I did my duty to preserve safety and order in a community that was spiraling into non-compliance. She claimed my daughter had demonstrated destructive behavior and that my position as sheriff allowed me to intimidate neighbors and misuse power. Let me be clear. I didn't intimidate. I informed. And I responded to her intimidation with law, not force. But perception matters, and some neighbors, especially the older crowd, started wondering if maybe, just maybe, I had gone too far. It hurt. All I wanted was to raise my daughter without fear. Not to be dragged into a war of politics and image. But then something unexpected happened. Kayla came home from school with paint on her shoes and glitter in her braids. She was glowing. Kayla. Daddy, we had a chalk-in. I blinked. Me. And what now? Kayla, beaming. Me and the other kids. We filled the park sidewalk. Everyone drew something. They said it's for me. She handed me a picture. It showed a stick figure girl holding hands with a taller figure wearing a sheriff's badge. The caption read, "No more mean people. Just art." I took a deep breath. My throat tightened. I realized, whatever some adults believed, the kids knew the truth. And that was enough. Later that week, I got a call from Channel 7. Reporter, on phone. Sheriff Cole, we're doing a follow-up on the HOA incident. We want to hear your side, directly. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to let it all fade away. But another part, the part that wore a badge, knew this wasn't just about my story. It was about every parent who's been shamed into silence. Every kid told their creativity wasn't clean enough. Every neighbor bullied under the guise of rules. I agreed. The camera rolled. Lights on. Microphone clipped. Reporter. What started as a small HOA dispute has now become a national conversation. Sheriff Cole, what do you want people to understand about what happened? Me. That this wasn't about chalk. It was about control. My daughter lost her mom. She found a way to express her feelings through art. And instead of compassion, she got complaints. We can't keep pretending rules matter more than people. Reporter. Some say you used your badge to influence the outcome. Me. I didn't need to use my badge. I used facts, the law, and a father's voice. And that's stronger than any title. The interview aired on a Friday night. Within 48 hours, our local news station saw record engagement. The hashtag let kids draw trended for 72 hours. And the cherry on top? Kayla was invited to speak at her school assembly about kindness. She stood on a stool, her voice shaky at first but growing with confidence. Kayla. When people try to erase your colors, you draw brighter. When they tell you to stop, you make more. Because feelings aren't dirty. And love isn't a rule, it's a choice. There wasn't a dry eye in that gym. Even her teacher had to dab her eyes with a tissue. I stood in the back, my chest full of pride. I wasn't just raising a survivor. I was raising a warrior, with chalk dust still on her fingers. But like all battles, even this one had ripples. 3 other families came forward, filing formal complaints against the HOA board, 2 for wrongful fines, 1 for emotional distress. Laura's blog post backfired. The management company investigated her years of leadership and discovered she'd rewritten at least 5 neighborhood rules without consent. They stripped her of all rights to participate in any HOA in the county. Again. She moved 2 towns over, into a neighborhood that didn't have an HOA. Fitting, really. A queen without a kingdom. One warm evening, I sat on the porch sipping iced tea. Kayla was on the sidewalk again, this time drawing a dragon hugging a rainbow. A neighbor walked by, Mr. Thomas, Vietnam vet, cranky but kind. He saluted me casually and said, "Mr. Thomas. She's got talent. World needs more colors like hers." I smiled. Me. And fewer people trying to wash them away. Not all HOA stories end in drama. But too many start with silence. Neighbors too afraid to speak. Parents too tired to fight. But sometimes, you don't have to scream. You just have to stand. Even if your only weapon is a driveway full of chalk. Me. If you're watching this and you felt small, if you've been bullied by systems that were supposed to serve you, remember this: authority doesn't make someone right. Compassion does. And no rulebook should ever come before what's decent, kind, and human. Most stories end with resolution. But the good ones? They leave behind a ripple, an echo of what changed. This one left a chalk-stained legacy. Weeks turned to months. Summer bloomed in Maple Ridge. The HOA had changed. New leadership brought new ideas, and most importantly, perspective. The new HOA president? A retired teacher named Ms. Clara. First thing she did? Host a sidewalk celebration weekend in honor of Kayla's courage. It was more than just an event. It was a statement. Driveways became canvases. Chalk buckets were provided free by local businesses. One resident painted a mural of Kayla's son and sheriff drawing across 4 sidewalk panels. Even the mayor stopped by and handed Kayla a certificate for outstanding bravery and expression through art. I'll never forget what he said to her. "Mayor. Sometimes the smallest hands make the biggest mark." Kayla beamed. I saw in her eyes something I hadn't seen in months: freedom. Not just to draw, but to exist without fear. Still, we couldn't pretend that everything was perfect. Not every battle leaves without scars. One night, I heard Kayla talking in her sleep. Kayla, murmuring, "Don't take my chalk, please." It hit me like a punch to the chest. She was still holding on to it, all that fear. All that trauma. That's when I realized justice isn't always enough. Sometimes, healing needs something more. So I did something a little different. I converted part of our backyard into a permanent chalk garden. Soft pavement. Shaded trees. A small fountain. A plaque on the wall read, Kayla's Corner, where colors have no rules. She gasped when she saw it. Kayla. It's just for me? Me. It's for you, and for every kid who needs a place to feel safe. No rules. No fines. Just freedom. She hugged me so hard I almost dropped the bucket of chalk. After that, everything shifted. Other parents started asking about creating their own freedom corners. Local schools adopted sidewalk art zones as emotional outlets. Even the sheriff's office held an expression day for kids who had lost loved ones, just like Kayla. The event? Led by Kayla herself. Dozens of kids gathered in front of the precinct. Some shy. Some giggling. But all holding chalk. Kayla stood at the front, her little note cards trembling in her hand. Kayla. I thought when Mommy died, I had no voice. But I found it through colors. Maybe you can too. Somewhere in the crowd, a boy started drawing a butterfly. A girl spelled out, I miss you, Dad. A third kid wrote, it's okay to cry. I turned away for a second, too many emotions rising at once. This wasn't about HOA anymore. This was about healing. About transformation. And about the unexpected power of a child who refused to be silenced. And yet, Laura's story wasn't entirely over. One crisp autumn morning, I stopped at the grocery store. As I reached for a can of soup, I heard a familiar voice. Laura. Sheriff. I turned. She looked thinner. Quieter. The fire in her eyes replaced by something else, regret? Laura. I moved to Ridge Hill. No HOA. Just trees and raccoons. Me. Sounds peaceful. She hesitated. Laura. I thought I was doing what was right. But somewhere along the way, I forgot people matter more than policies. Me. We all forget things. What matters is what we do when we remember. She gave a quiet nod. Laura. Tell your daughter. I'm sorry. I didn't say much back. But as she walked away, I hoped she meant it. Forgiveness doesn't come easy. But sometimes, the hardest apologies aren't spoken out loud, they're lived. And I knew deep down. Laura's chapter in our story was over. Months later, I found a folded paper in Kayla's backpack. It was an essay titled, The Day the Colors Fought Back. She wrote, Asterisk, when people tried to erase my colors, my daddy helped me paint bigger ones. When they told me art didn't belong, we made it belong. And when someone called the cops, they didn't know. My dad was the sheriff. And his badge wasn't just shiny, it was kind. Asterisk. There it was. The real ending. Not in the HOA meetings. Not in the fines. Not even in the chalk. But in a little girl who found her voice. And in a neighborhood that finally listened. Kayla runs through a splash of sprinklers, chalk staining her arms. Parents wave across the street, drawing rainbows with their kids. A new HOA bulletin board titled Community Creativity Zone. James placing Kayla's drawing in a frame on the wall labeled First Amendment in crayon. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. But sometimes, all it takes is a piece of chalk, a driveway, and a child bold enough to draw her heart on concrete. For the world to see. Let that be a lesson to every neighborhood tyrant. You never know whose kid you're messing with. Because sometimes, that kid's dad is the sheriff. And he's not afraid to color outside the lines.